former administrative officer in the Immigration Department, Teresita Castellanos, in her appearance in February, aptly summed up the reason the Senate Special Select Committee is the talk of the nation.
The Immigration Department has an entrenched culture of corruption and hustling, milking the cow, we see, from the very top to the very bottom of the ladder. No politician can force a public officer to do illegal acts when performing our jobs. And if we do, we should face the same consequence. We should face the same consequence as the politicians, if necessary, if it comes to that. For the Belizean people are demanding justice. There are a few good, honest, and dedicated immigration officers, but there was not enough trusted staff to oversee the daily operations of the sections and at the district offices and border station. The call for help was not answered, and this inquiry is the result.
On a near weekly basis, Belizeans tuned in as the mud flew back and forth. Oversight, ignorance, and occasional deliberate blindness to law and principle, a department so stuck in the morass that it was a wonder anything got done. But as the inquiry reached the very top, the memories got shorter, especially for former Minister Elvin Penner about his special relationship with Wong Hong Kim.
How and when did you meet Mr. Kim?
Again, that's a question that I will not answer.
Mr. Penner, can you tell the committee why you are not answering that question?
I made my statement and my reasons why in my opening statement. You can refer to that. And like I said, if that is not sufficient for you to excuse me to not answer that question, then the Senate has the full right to do and take whatever actions you all feel is necessary to take.
Penner's former colleagues, Anthony Boots Martinez, and especially Edmond Castro, and to a lesser extent, Manuel Heredia, Carlos Perdomo, and Rene Montero, often tried to evade or belittle their questioners, as when Castro was confronted with the infamous statement by PM Barrow about how ministerial procuration of visas would cause the government to fall. He denied it and tried to change the topic.
And the question was posed to you. Do you remember that statement?
No, sir.
Don't you? But in court documents, Minister, you answered yes.
We in a court right now, Joe?
No.
Well,
no,
I
Minister.
tell you something. I don't remember.
You referred us to this statement. And I'm reminding you that you are under oath and that you run the risk of perjury.
Look, I tell you something. We did a Senate hearing to deal with this issue, the recommendation. You make us stick to it, no? You know they go to court, man. You don't deal with that.
So your answer remains that you've never heard that statement from the Prime Minister.
Where is this visa hustle evidence that you guys are talking about? Where is it?
Defiance of the top dogs aside, the questions later turned to how to fix immigration's many woes. It won't be easy, as up to the present day, Director of Immigration Diana Locke testified that some will stop at nothing to circumvent the system, even for something as innocuous as queuing up.
I have had occasions where I have had to go in. I had a complaint from someone where they went there at, I think it was 4:30 in the morning, and they got number 16. And we reviewed the camera, and we were able to see that not that many people had gone there. What had been happening, the security were making entries into that diary for people who had contacted them. I have no proof whether or not there was a fee paid, but we do know that there were entries being made into the booklet for people. So if you came at 4 in the morning, you may well have gotten number 15. We took steps to address that, and we told them that the numbers would not be issued.
At its core, the inquiry is about getting to the bottom of the corruption and hustling, not just who did it, but who will do something, anything, about it. Business Community Senator and Committee Member Mark Lizarraga made clear that it is a team effort.
We'll have to wait and see what the majority of the members say, but I certainly believe at this point, it's speaking to a deficiency at the ministry level to properly addressing these things, because we've heard people say in testimony that they knew from the very top to the very bottom. They knew what was happening. You've heard that testimony too. So we need to see now where the will is to fix it.
Aaron Humes reporting for News 5.
And given the one-year history and all the testimonies, of course, that summary is well appreciated to be able to set the backdrop for this conversation. I'm joined at this time by attorney at law Richard Dickie Bradley as we discuss what happens now after the end of this portion of the inquiry. Good morning and welcome.
Morning, Marlene. For once, the studio is not cool. Just when I came prepared.
Well, it may get a little chilly later, but for now, it's nice and comfortable. But I want to, you know, what I find interesting with the story that just aired is that it's very easy to lose track of all that has been uncovered over the course of the year of the Senate Select Committee inquiry. And I want to get your perspective as it closed off last week on how you felt whether or not it was successful.
It was very successful. It is an encouraging development in our little jewel. Who would believe that it's been a whole year that this has been going on? And major kudos to the media, because they have actually kept the issues alive by their excellent reporting, actually, as you've just shown to your viewers. Exact footage, sometime actually in real time as it is happening, it's being broadcast. But certainly the news has constantly highlighted a matter to a portion of the society. We like to say, oh, the younger generation, you know, they study nothing but music videos and chit-chat and Facebook and so on. But this is a big development in Belize. Why? Because, in fact, the laws, the rules and regulations that govern both the Senate and the House of Representatives make allowances for these officials to engage in a public inquiry into these matters. And this one, which is probably the second one in the history of independent Belize, has shown that there is usefulness, and that for once I will disagree with the poet from Jamaica, Muta Baruka, who says the system is a fraud. There is some indication that we can work the system. This is what this Senate hearing has done. Yeah. And a little background would be very important as well. I think also, as we want to thank the media for the excellent coverage, we want to thank the people who started it all. For 11 days, the teachers of Belize, through their union leaders and organizers, withstood all the threats and the low, worthless slander and scandal against them, and actually went on a strike, marched through the streets of this country to demand that we start to do something for better governance, better government. They actually had a list of demands, and one of those lists was there must be a Senate hearing into the findings of the Auditor General, who is also another hero or shiro that has emerged in relation to our young society. So for me, who I know, I'm always saying like, yeah, nothing will happen. Guatemala don't take SARS tuning, going with half a PG and so on. This has been a welcome development in the society.
I appreciate the point that you are bringing out, because I think it is important to look at it in terms of how it fits within a democratic process, or system of governance that we have. Oftentimes things take place in the country and people feel that there is no recourse. And even this particular inquiry didn't come about as easily if we can be able to refresh our memories from a year ago. There were substantial challenges in getting the motion passed through the Senate. There were challenges with the formulation of the committee itself. And there were challenges in terms of there were concerns about the final terms of reference. But what it has proven are two things. One, that the people can push and action can be taken to get us to move to the point of the investigation. And two, although there were quite a number of failures of composition and of terms of reference, it seems that the committee was able to work with what was finally agreed upon.
Yes. Their job was made a lot easier because of the heavy workload put in by the staff of the audit and the Auditor General, who produced a 3-volume report, one on visa, another on citizenship, nationality, another on passport. So there were 3 volumes which I don't know how that managed to slip out. I think there was sloppiness on the part of the government. The Auditor General is required by law to submit her reports to the Prime Minister of the country, who would then, after presumably checking with the particular ministry and having them clear up whatever needs to be cleared up, is required, technically speaking, to in fact table those audit reports in the National Assembly. And nobody took the report seriously. It was sent out to the members of the National Assembly, which means it fell into the hands of the opposition, who promptly started leaking the documents, and then things started to come out. And then the society, as you say, already upon overload, just like can't believe that this is happening in one department of the government. This is a whole series of things that has been going wrong, completely wrong. So that, and of course that came against another background, a lady named Miss Burgess from down south. She had come on Channel 5 to actually speak truth to power and to damn the consequences. She said, I was involved in this matter. Ministers are hustling off of this thing. They are selling, they're actually charging money to assist in getting visas and so. So there was a lot of people who, not a lot, but there were people who were brave enough to come forward and take up that challenge.
Now, we also saw that within the hearings itself, there were quite a number of, there were public officers who came out and spoke about the corruption that was taking place, and oftentimes the diversion of the established protocols within the Immigration Department, oftentimes for fear of being, for fear of going against what a minister's influence may mean. Now, I suppose the most important question at this point, and if we could use the historical context, it would be good. When there was the last Senate inquiry, there was a lot of information that came out as well. And I suppose if we can use that as a question as to whether or not the revelation of this information will do anything to change what has been a continuous issue within the Immigration Department and its services in terms of passport, visas, and nationality. What's your perspective on that?
It's a harder question. I think the first Senate hearing was trying to zero in on whether there was irregularities and illegalities at Social Security Board. And it was a little more difficult to make that a sexy subject like the one that emerged out of the Senate hearing, because you actually had, in some cases, red meat being flung around. I mean, there was no doubt that wrongdoing was taking place. It was not one wrongdoing, it was not 2 irregularities. This like the whole system just gone awry. They're not gone awry, there are people who are just actually exploiting the system. The hearings are important. I think the society is satisfied that there is evidence of wrongdoing. You will notice that the second auditor's report, the one that looks at several ministries within a short period, remember this particular audit report is only for the period 2011 to 2013. It's only 2 years because of the multitude of irregularities and so on. Also, you know, I'm glad you asked that question, which is too hard for me to answer, but you know, if nothing else, this is what we want to hope for would start to emerge among our people. First of all, the public hearings are basically at an end. They have stimulated us in the way, as I mentioned, that we can't all be totally cynical and nothing was done. You could do this, man, they want to do this, they want to cover up, they don't make nothing come out of it, because that has what has been happening in the society. We have an excellent example right now. I understand you all dealt with it briefly yesterday, but we have an excellent example where the taxpayers of this country are going to have to pay $90 million because of the slackness and arrogance of the government, that a $30 million loan, the interest alone, sound like a rhyme, but becomes 90 and 90 when all the legal fees and other costs are added. Man, in any democracy, people have to resign. You have to resign. So what I'm leading up to is to say this. The Senate Select Committee members are now required by their terms of reference to, while all of us are watching television and our favorite shows, and so they will have to work to produce a report of their findings back to the Senate, which appointed them and set up the committee. That report, once it is tabled, and it won't be tabled, I imagine, before elections, once it is tabled, it becomes a public document, so we can see in writing a more concise reporting of what has been taking place. But also they are required by their terms of reference to make recommendations, which is now what we're looking for. We all agree that there was a lot of wrongdoing going on and abuse of culture. So that is the first one. The other one, before it slips my mind, which I want to mention, is this. We saw a number of public officers struggling to answer questions. They all know much more than they said because they're in the belly of the beast. But with whatever minor defects and deficiencies they handle themselves, massive respect is due because they are in a culture where, as a public officer or as public officers, the legal and the constitutional protection that should be afforded to public officers is not there. They are at the whims and fancies of vengeful, vindictive politicians, and their jobs and their livelihoods are at stake. And this is something new for them. Hopefully now, as we go on as a society practicing our democracy, people will feel more emboldened to say more things. You know what is one of the shocking things about Belize and about this present public service that has been around for some while, is that nobody is leaking out information. You know the problem Donald Trump has with this Russia connection is there are people who are telling the investigators and showing the investigators things. In Belize, take for example, the Prime Minister of our country has publicly said that there's a cesspool of corruption at the Ministry of Lands, and yet nothing is coming out from the public officers who see the documents, handle the documents, know the massive wrongdoing that has been going on. So we don't have that culture yet, but the fact that public officers have been able to say something, it means they have broken the fear.
Or perhaps even prompt future independent investigations, as we have seen with the Immigration Department, with the audit report on the Immigration Department. Now, you spoke about the public officers, and I thought that was to discuss this morning. We've had subsequent conversations with representatives of the Public Service Union, current and past, about perhaps even enhancing their roles, increasing membership, and ensuring that union members are aware of the protection mechanisms they have under the PSU. In other words, if I am an officer in the Immigration Department and I am told by a minister or a supervisor to do something that I know I should not be doing, there is a recourse they can take through the PSU. But we never saw that in this case.
No, because listen, let me share something with you. One, it is only 1 year that the teachers of this country marched. They had marched, I think, in 2004-05. They had gone on strike at that time as well.
Yeah. There's been a larger NTUCB march as well.
Yes,
we remember that with the
right,
adjustments.
I remember that. But I wanted to say that when the teachers stood up in September, October of last year, they were on their own.
Yeah.
That is a very important matter that needs more discussion in the society. Why? Because the other unions have been subverted.
That is a claim that BNTU has said in the past, that there is political manipulation taking place within
Clearly,
other unions.
no.
And we've heard the union representatives speak of trying to get themselves in a better position than we see them right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that is one of the more shameful...
But my point is, because the public service union can be a mechanism, if it is strengthened, if they properly educate their members themselves, that if you are asked to do something that you are not required to do, that is not within the law that you should do, or not within the established protocols, procedures in your particular department, that you can choose not to do it, have your proper documentation, and also use the PSU as your vehicle to be able to address these concerns. Is that not the case?
Not really, no. That is how it should be, but that's not how
But it is the case, perhaps not being used.
Or you could say that, yes. It's like, well, the system provides for
Yeah.
it, but then it doesn't take place for a number of reasons. Listen, when the President of the United States of America, Richard Nixon, started running into trouble over what was basically a minor burglary, they broke into the other party, the Democratic Party's headquarters, to snoop around and find out what they were planning for the upcoming election. What appeared to be a relatively minor matter snowballed into the effect that a President of the United States of America had to resign and leave office. I think, though, I wanted to make this point. There is no culture in the public service, and you're talking about thousands of persons, and you're talking about one of the most highly trained organizations. They're well educated, they're all basically knowledgeable, experienced, and in fact some of them are experts in their fields. We don't have a culture just don't have a culture of that. The Public Services Union represents a small percentage in terms of numbers, because as you mentioned, they really need to get out there and do some membership drives and recruitment. But the union is not a robust union, and public officers know they cannot go to their union to protect them. So if you don't have that confidence that I can stand up for what is right because my union got my back and I will not go down over this matter, they don't have that. In fact, the point I wanted to make when the teachers were all alone, the shameful history of the unions is standing up one side and watching the teachers being maligned and so on. That is not how unions operate, because unions get their strength by in fact linking up with each other and standing up for principles. So when individual public officers see those things, you know what, I'd hold my corner.
I understand your point, and tying in another issue, looking at our signing on to UNCAC and some of the legislative changes that may come, would it potentially then be, we know that the whistleblower legislation is a portion of the implementation of the UNCAC itself. Do you feel that perhaps, and we don't have an actual draft, we don't know what it will entail, but the potential for a whistleblower legislation is one that can allow any person, public servant or not, to be able to raise the red flag when something is not right?
And there's no pun on red because it's a term, no?
Bell the cat, let's say that.
Bell the poor cat. Yes, but history teaches us that what is the law and what is the practice and the culture, they are not synchronized. And so you can't legislate for bravery, you can't legislate for persons to lose their cowardice or to lose their ambition to want to advance in an organization. In a society in which jobs are very, very scarce, it's all so well and good and so, but look at the people who tried to be whistleblowers in our society. they are trampled upon, they are hounded. I think the party machinery for at least one party is to attack you and to call you names and to single out your family members and to do all kind of things. The teachers just gone through that, but they were strong enough to stay in large numbers, which we need to emphasize that, because a bad thing has happened to Belize, man. There is an umbrella organization for all unions, and then drop the ball big time, major, because the teachers, guess what is important in this as well, Marlene? The teachers were not fighting for their 3% salaries increase, which they were due and were entitled to get. None other than the Prime Minister said, listen, we just don't have the money. Let us defer it. The other unions agreed with the Prime Minister, we will defer it. The teachers were not fighting for that. They had a list of 8 issues, none of which was about them. That is an awesome thing. And you know why I'm keep coming back to the teachers? Can I tell you something very quickly? I was the secretary of the Public Services Union. When the heads of agreement came around, I was young and reckless and take the keys and buck it in at the lock so that when they go the morning of the strike, they can't open the lock for the government departments and so on. And that whole episode of the minister from Britain came here, Nicholas Ridley, and insulted the unions and the country and made all kind of statements and so. So let me tell you this part. A man like William Tillett, who was the president of the union at the time, these people came under enormous pressure. The whole history of that episode has evaporated. Public officers who should be keeping records and things and so we don't want what the teachers have done to go the way of the Public Services Union and their failure to appreciate their own history. We need to keep it in the forefront. We need to tell them we really appreciate what they did. I can remember the images.
But they have been following up and even wrote to the Prime Minister for updates on their 8-point good governance agenda, and we know the Prime Minister replied in where they should be able to access that information. But let's come back to the inquiry itself, because we're quickly running out of time. And you said something earlier, and I know we know it to be the case, that people are cynical of these types of processes, that you'll spend a full year speaking to all these different persons. Some were more forthcoming with information, some were just plain obstinate. And we were able to see and understand a bit more as to how these particular corrupt practices developed and why they continued. But the point of the Senate inquiry is to be able to get recommendations, and I feel like that's where oftentimes people don't understand what it was established to do. It was to find out what happened and to put recommendations forward as to how you can prevent it in the future, not necessarily to have criminal charges brought against any person who seemed that they were involved in these activities.
There is a thing that is lacking in my years in the public service on a fairly regular basis, where we couldn't do it ourselves, and there were times when we did it ourselves, in the sense that the government appointed Keith Arnold, Anthony Sylvester Sr., and other persons to do a review of the public service, if it's only in some particular areas. There were people from the Commonwealth who came and were asked, this is their terms of reference, to review the public service. What is lacking in the society, certainly for the last 10, 15 years, is that there is no reform taking place. So, you can't say, why customs and continue in the same way, nothing changes. The officers, they have 5, 6 houses, all valued at $1 million and odd dollars and so on. Nothing happens there. We look at the police, the poor police, they can't investigate Mr. Penner, they can't investigate the Hang Wang thing, they can't investigate nobody because they're under control. In fact, an important thing to point out, and hopefully recommendations will maybe take a look at it, is how come, in the face of all these things that were coming out at immigration, the ministry responsible for immigration, like there's no ministry, they don't order they don't order nothing into their department. They themselves don't go and check their department, and this applies to all the other departments. Listen, a thing is happening right now. A young man was raped in the prison. He's not going to take it. He's going to come forward. That is an incredible thing. You know why? If you hear the abuse that he and other prisoners have been subjected to, and so on, that is going on in the prison, All these things, there's no ministry, you know. The ministry exists only in name. The minister don't think he's responsible. Cabinet don't call on the minister to make a report to them. The chief executive officer is probably some government crony or something. So nothing happens. So you are so right that, listen, the first half, excellent, 90 odd out of 100% if the teachers were grading them. Now let's see the recommendations. Mm-hmm. Let's hear how we can prevent this from happening, and at the same time send a message to other departments that you can be summoned to a Senate hearing in public and questioned about what has been going wrong in your department or ministry.
Now, and what of the aspect of criminal charges?
Well, it is not a witch hunt. Yeah. And second...
And it is not a part of the mandate of the committee itself.
Well, it is in the sense that they're required to make recommendations too. What is the sense of you carrying out a whole 1 year thing and you know that something has gone contrary to what the law requires and you don't say anything? But we don't want it to be like, let's see who all they will call upon the police now investigate. Nothing, they can't. Let's understand that. Let's not delude anybody who is listening and thinking we're looking now to see, I wonder if this one will get arrested. Nothing will happen with that. And I want to go back to the whistleblowers. There is a need in Belize for us, and it's very, very easy, to come up with a whistleblowers legislation, because that would be something new in our culture that we can assist people. Actually...
And what it does is provide for a level of protection.
Yes,
when you
protection.
Come forward. But I appreciate what you're saying, and I think, you know, in all the conversations we've been having about the UNCAC, I hope that when this legislation is drafted, that there will be sufficient consultation conducted with the public and all relevant persons so that we can ensure that it is as robust a legislation as it can be.
They not draft that yet? You don't have to draft it, you know. Other countries have it. You just go through it and sorry to use.
But we can't always use something from another world.
But there's a word they use in the legislative drafting and in the profession, mutatis mutandis. You take out the ones which apply to you and leave the ones which don't apply. It's just cut and paste, you know. Come on, they're taking us for fools. The legislation should have been tabled already, and there should be widespread discussions with all the stakeholders, the unions, and all the other people and organizations in the country. This is our first draft. Don't do it like what you did with the marijuana thing. Girl, you're entitled to have up to 10 grams of weed, but how you gonna get it now? Illegal to buy it, illegal to go get it, illegal to grow it. So that, I mean, can I say something to you very quickly? The unions did a fantastic thing. I say it again. It doesn't end there because, you know why? They not even draft the legislation for the UNCTAD. The Integrity Commission has not seen a single report. In fact, to all our shame, they made a decision that you don't have to send in anything. So all these years, nobody has seen nothing, which is required to be gazetted and published. So, you know, we make some strides, but we need to take a cold-blooded look at where we really, really are.
Now, let me get from your perspective what you see to be some of the positives that came out of the inquiry.
The positives would have to be that it took place publicly. Big, big development for a young society. Mm-hmm. Another positive would be that, in fact, no public officer resisted going and got attorneys to fight their going to the inquiry. Best as we can say, regardless of persons being a bit cautious in how they are answering questions because they are not sure what will happen later on. If you were given immunity, if we could have, because this is done in America, and they're doing it right now with this guy Flynn or whatever it is who is blowing the whistle that yes, we were speaking to Russians, the enemies. If you were to give immunity, which is where a whistleblower's legislation would do, if you say to the Director of Immigration, listen, in writing from the Director of Public Prosecutions, wherever, whomever, you are going to be immune from any kind of prosecution, from any kind of lashback, from any kind of attempts to demote you or do anything, and so talk to me, tell me exactly what you know, not just answer questions and say, well, yes, this was happening and so that is another positive, that public officers, because listen, the country is not run by 31 politicians. You know, the country is run by this machinery we call the public service. No money could come out of government account without they knowing. None can be spent wrongfully without they knowing. They know, but they are fearful and scared. So that is another positive. The fact that there will be written recommendations so that the social activists can get their hands on it and say why this is not being done, why this person is not being asked on. Those are positive things that are going to come out of it. It's a good example of how the democracy can work.
Will there be only one report that will come out from the inquiry?
I am hoping in regards to that matter that clearly there will be some resistance from the two UDP members if the other members are a bit strident and insistent on some recommendations or pointing fingers higher up. Because you know the tendency in Belize is to blame the person at the bottom. But the reason why you have people at the top is that it is their job to do oversight. It is their job to see that the rules are being followed. It's their job to do regular checks that things are not going wrong. They have totally failed.
So what happens if there's not consensus on the recommendations for the report?
There is a possibility, but I want to think that after the March elections, everybody will be, you know, we all know already. You can have a dissenting opinion.
Which means there can be more than one.
That is correct, yes. They could split up and you could get one from Pastor Rock, you could get one from the UDP senators, and you could get one from the I'm speculating, but
I'm only looking at the possibility.
Yes, there's that possibility because
we're moving into.
We are polarized, and I also want to say, Marlene, to your viewers that we have to remember that we have two tribes in the society which have been the curse on us, that you have the PUP and the UDP, and that, you know, there are daggers drawn over everything, even one simple thing like this. The Caribbean Court of Justice say you owe $90 million. We have to pay it, you know. All this foolishness where they go on like, oh, we never get nothing for it. You have to pay it. And the blue have to take the knock for it, and the red have to take the knock for it. And people out here are intelligent enough. It's only the sheep in the society that you can tell them, say blah, blah, and they holla blah, blah. The rest of people know what's going on. They're not stupid. They know that. So the positive is that this thing has happened. That is the positive. In a society where we all watch how politicians, they lie with, trick with, distract with, and never get anything done. And you know that, you know this, and I'm confessing now, you know I'm going to my grave that, like, Guatemala take away the Saskatoon River from us, and the political people have succeeded in keeping us distracted, and we don't want to deal with that.
First of all, you're not that close to your grave, so we
no, I'm far away, but I will end.
We still have some time to be able to. I don't want to distract. I need to get your closing points on the Senate inquiry, and I think everybody has been tuned in for a year. That there were times where it got a bit exhaustive, I think, when people weren't very forthcoming with information. But for the most part, people have been tuning in like it's a weekly soap opera to hear all this information come out. So it is a critical time, and as we head into Christmas, we get distracted for the next 2-3 weeks. But to remember that we still need to be paying attention to what happens next. What are your closing thoughts on that?
Well, in a society like ours, we depend on certain groupings, unions being one of them, there are others, to keep us, the regular citizens, informed of the things that are important in the society. We can't expect everybody on the street, everybody in the neighborhoods to be, you know, highly sensitized, to be following up every little thing that's going on, to be aware of all the irregularities and so on. No, that is a job that falls on other persons. It is our job in the media, in the NGOs, in the unions, in the churches who have a pulpit to say things, because Jesus spoke about things that were relevant and topical in his time. In fact, his cousin, John the Baptist, lost his head. I don't know if they had put it in a bucket, but he lost his head for speaking about where Herod they go on with. So there are groupings and there are entities in our society who have a heavier responsibility. It is said that those to whom much is given, much is expected in return. So a person like you, I say this all the time, you and Ricky who handle the cameras and the other people, their job is to make sure we are informing and educating, while at the same time we're providing a little bit of entertainment too. But the world is not just about entertainment. It's not Black Ink Crew and it's Kardashians and so on. There are serious things going on, and we are living in a society where we need to be focused on the important thing while we jump up and dance and enjoy ourselves in life. So that is the important part of it. Those who know better must share their knowledge and information and their views with others, no? And that is how this whole Senate inquiry has turned out to be such an excellent exercise that we can, in fact, keep in the forefront. A matter that basically could have become very dull and boring and lose its currency. It did not, and for that the media really deserve every bit of things. So before you tell me goodbye and don't come back until next year, can you allow me 1 minute to do something very quickly? I met a lady, and that lady, her grandfather is my grandfather. And if your camera can pick up this picture, this is my grandfather, who was born in February 1885. And this picture was taken out either at Half Moon Key or English Key. So, and the reason I'm doing it is because this year, the house that he built on Wagner Lane is 100 years old.
Wow.
In 1817. And this book, which is for people like me who fool with the sea and have all the charts and all the things there, it says here that before Hurricane Hattie, my grandfather and his dad, who is on that picture too, they were both builders on Half Moon Key, because my grandfather had his own sailing boat, Arrow. So I'm going to take this picture for the lady who she and I have the same grandfather. And on that note, I want to thank you and wish you and your staff all the best for the Christmas.
And thank you for coming in as well. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by representatives of the National Council on Aging, so stay tuned.